Thanks for joining us on another episode of Lincoln to Local. This week, we caught up with Steve Thompson for an update on two major pieces of legislation that we've been tracking all session, as well as an update on a few other things as we are now officially in the second half of the 2024 legislative session. All right, Steve, it seems like the 2024 legislative session has really been dominated by two major topics and pieces of legislation, one of those being the poultry bill that we have been tracking. Can you kind of give our members just a little bit of an update on where that sits?
Well, that bill passed through both the House committee and the House floor pretty smoothly. There were a few questions and concerns that were pretty easily addressed, but we've seen quite a bit of noise coming from the Senate side. It's awaiting hearing in the Senate Ag Committee over the next couple of weeks, and so we're working with senators to try to make sure they understand what's going on. There's been an outreach campaign of seems to be kind of based in around the Tulsa area with some environmental groups that have published some information, and really even some animal rights groups in Oklahoma City that have teamed up to put things out that are just not factually correct, and said some pretty negative things about our producers and how this bill would impact the state of Oklahoma. So we've been working hard both with our team here in the Public Policy Division and the field staff to try to work with senators and their staff to understand what the bill does and what it doesn't do. And very proud of our friends at the Department of Ag and a few of the other agencies and really the subject matter experts to clarify that. And it's a thing we're going to be reaching out to our members very soon and asking them to contact senators about that and express their support for what our ag producers do. But I mean, the bottom line truly is that this is a bill aimed at incentivizing producers to meet all the benchmarks, to do it all the right way, because we've seen instances where folks were following the laws and the rules that the Department of Ag had, and they still got drug into legal action from outside groups that were trying to make more of a political point than anything else. And so we want to make sure that our folks that are carrying on their business get left alone, and they work with both the Conservation Commission and the conservation districts as well as USDA on the front end to write really truly a site-specific nutrient management plan for how they handle their poultry waste and how that works to balance both the environment and the economy. And then on the back end, they work with the State Department of Agriculture on compliance and inspection to make sure that they are properly executing that plan. And this would provide them with a bit of a legal immunity shield for those activist lawsuits. And I think that's really what's driving the conversation at the Capitol is some of those groups just don't like modern agriculture. And so they've made their voice heard very loud. And that's why we as Farm Bureau need to speak up and try to counter that and make sure that we explain that we do want to do it the right way. We are good stewards of the land, air, and water, and we're proud to produce livestock for the grocery stores, and we're going to keep doing that. We just want to make sure our producers have all the tools. But the members will be seeing an action alert here in the coming days, and would ask for them to contact their senators and express their support for House Bill 4118.
And what type of things are we hearing from the opposition, and kind of what are we doing as Farm Bureau to combat those or to tell our side of the story?
You know, that was one of the more interesting things is as you hear kind of secondhand from the senators what they had been told from folks about this, it paints this narrative that farmers and ranchers are polluting the waterways, and this is somehow a get out of jail free card to continue to do that. And when we have data from the Conservation Commission and others that show that over the last 20 years, the waterways in eastern Oklahoma have continued to improve once we started implementing some of these rules and regulations in the late 1990s. And the claims that producers don't do things the right way, and this would allow them to continue to do it the wrong way without legal action is very troubling. And that's the main thing that you hear is it claims that this is going to allow farmers and ranchers to pollute, and it paints the narrative that that's how we do business, and it just doesn't make much sense because you're not going to continue in business if that's the way that you do things. And so we want to make sure that the farmers and ranchers' voice gets through to the Capitol. And really, it's partially an education mission, and that's why we spent a lot of time, longer than normal, with each individual senator in their offices trying to explain how things work. And that's why the Department of Agriculture and their team has spent some time trying to educate folks. That's truly, in this day and age of term limits and legislators that cycle in and out, sometimes you do have to go back and say, hey, here's how this works, because not everybody knows all the technical specs of how a poultry grower operates, and legal and regulatory environment that they have to operate in. And so we're really excited that we have our field staff with us there at the Capitol most days, and really excited for them to connect some of our members over the next week or so that our Farm Bureau members' voices can be part of this process, because sometimes we do feel like we're outnumbered by the urban folks, and this is one of those times that the urban folks have spoke up really loud and shown that they really don't understand how farming and ranching and how the agronomy practices work and some of the standards that have been developed over a number of years. And so we just need to make sure that our voices enter into that conversation and make sure that the senators have all the facts and figures so that they can make a reasonable decision.
Definitely. It'll be interesting to see where that one goes next week. So one of the other major topics we've been talking about is water and groundwater metering and permitting. And I know that legislation has changed quite a bit from where it started. Can you give us kind of an update on where that sits?
This year has really highlighted, we truly are a statewide organization. We spend a lot of time talking about what's happening on the ground in eastern Oklahoma with this poultry bill, but it could have impacts all over the state. Well, we can say the same thing in reverse when it comes to water. We're driven by a lot of the conversation in western Oklahoma, where they have a deficit of water in a lot of cases, but the impacts of this could reach all around the state. And there was the piece of legislation by Senator Howard at the beginning of the year, and it's been picked up by Representative Carl Newton that we've talked about all the way through. And I think today where we stand with that bill, not a single sentence of the original introduced bill is still in there. We've gone back to the drawing board and worked with a whole bunch of parties, and really focusing on irrigators, both in southwest Oklahoma, a couple of different regions, in the Oklahoma Panhandle, as well as northwest Oklahoma, to develop what we think is a good start, but we're still a long ways from being done, and how we might create a process for measuring how much water is used by those irrigation systems, so we can have a database that shows that most of our folks, we feel like, are doing it the right way. But the folks who might be currently exceeding, whether accidentally or on purpose, their legally allotted amount, that they would need to come into compliance with the current law. But this would just provide a window into how that was going, so that we make sure we are good stewards of that resource. What we found is there's a lot of technical challenges about different operations, different basins, different equipment, different irrigation systems. And so it's been a long conversation, and just trying to get more people involved in that. And water is very emotional. We know that, and it's so different region to region. But currently there's discussion ongoing on that, and I think that's the thing that we may get an initial start this year, but it's going to be something working with the Water Resources Board after session to develop the more fine-tuned administrative procedures, and truly it will be a long-term process, because I think what the bill currently envisions is really an 8-year phase-in around the state. So it's certainly not going to affect all of the permitted water wells in the state all at once, and I think it'd probably be a 2 to 3 years before it would affect anybody. But it's a long-term conversation, and we're proud to connect our members' voice into that as well. And we've been hosting calls a couple of times a week with members and producers about that, and working with some other industries. Oil and gas primarily has a lot of interest in the water usage in the state. And so we're still very optimistic that we can come to something that everybody agrees on, but we're still in officially in a neutral capacity on the legislation as it sits today. And spent a long time with the state board answering their questions last week, and they encouraged us to move forward and continue to try to get the best product available for farmers and ranchers all around the state. And currently working really more on the eastern side to see how those water users who might use less water than the west side and might have more water available, how can we make sure that it's not really a burden upon their operation if they're really not the target area. But anytime you have to pass a law for the entire state, it's a little bit tricky to handle some of those specific regional issues. So we still have plenty of work left to do, and so we're proud that there's still April and May left this session, because we may need every bit of that to get to a workable piece of legislation.
Definitely. I know we have a lot of members with a lot of vested interest in that, so it's good to see progress there. Well, one thing that has moved recently is a piece of legislation that's really going to benefit our 4-H students. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
That's right. That's been a bright spot and otherwise kind of a slow grinding session. It's actually a bill that was introduced in 2023 and made it 3/4 of the way through the process and kind of stalled out there. And so due to the request of some of our members in north central Oklahoma, we kind of helped pump some life back into that. But this bill passed the Senate last week, and it would allow students who are involved in approved 4-H activities to qualify for excused absences. 4-H is a little bit different than FFA. It's not considered an in-school activity in most cases, and so we've seen kind of an increase in problems where kids today have so many things going on. There's such a pull on their time, but we're very defensive on behalf of 4-H and FFA and want to make sure that students still are able to participate in those very valuable projects and remain in good standing with their school. And so working with a lot of different folks, I think we're able to get a good product there. And there are some benchmarks that they have to meet and things they have to do so that it has to be legitimate, and some exceptions when it doesn't apply. But working with the state 4-H program leaders, we're very optimistic this will be a step forward for that program and remove some local conflicts that continue to arise and make sure that at the end of the day, the students have the best possible outcome in those programs. And so that's on the governor's desk, and I think they're making a decision on that later on today. So we'll hopefully have a positive update on the final outcome to that. But we're excited to see that get its way through the legislature this year.
Yeah, that's great news. So one thing members have here in a couple weeks is the Washington, D.C. Summit. Can you kind of give us a preview of what that trip's going to look like and what members can expect?
Yeah, that's really a highlight where we gather 40 or 50 or some years up to 60 members, and everybody heads to Washington, D.C. for the better part of a week, and we'll get to spend some time with our counterparts from American Farm Bureau Federation the first night, as well as some congressional staff members, kind of an orientation session and an opening event. And then the next day we'll spend quite a bit of time with some industry leaders in both House and Senate Ag committees, as well as some subject matter experts from AFBF to kind of get our members prepared for what the current climate is in Washington, D.C. and the issues that agriculture is focusing on. And then we'll have a couple of days with the Oklahoma congressional delegation in both the House and Senate, and very excited to go to their office space. Basically, we'll be meeting in part in the House Science Committee room where Congressman Frank Lucas is the chairman, and so we're excited to kind of go where the action is in Washington, D.C. and meet with those folks. And then also we have a few special guests, I think maybe from some international trade discussions. I think we're going to meet with the British Embassy's agricultural staff to talk about trade with the U.K. and a few things where agriculture might be expanding a footprint around the globe. So we're really excited to hear from some of those industry leaders and to allow Oklahoma farmers and ranchers to get their voice into the conversation in Washington, D.C. So that's always a highlight trip for all of us.
Definitely. It's definitely something to look forward to. Well, thanks so much for joining us this week, Steve.